Hi, my name is Frank Tritini. I'm here with Man, an archetypal look at masculinity through movies, myth, and legends. I'm here with Jim Curtan, and we've really have to talk about the greatest, Muhammad Ali. Just last week when me and Jim were talking, Ali came up in our weekly talk, and we reminisced about him. We weren't reminiscing. He wasn't dead yet. And then, a few days later, he passed away, and it had such a profound effect on me instantaneously. It was just loss of something, a great man that we could all aspire to, whether you agreed with him or not, how he lived his life, the struggles that he dealt with, how he dealt with them in the face of everything. You may not agree with his opinion, but if I ever met a man that said they couldn't hold Ali or wouldn't hold Ali in high esteem, I would lose deep respect, immediate respect for that man. I wouldn't care who he was. I think he's a man that we can all respect, regardless of race, creed, belief, anything. And I just wanted to get on and make this movie with Jim because we were just talking about him, and I know, Jim, you had a great affinity for him as well.
Well, I didn't realize until I was reading all the articles that he was just a year younger than me. And I was an adult during most of the civil rights stuff. I was an adult when I was in grad school when John Kennedy was killed, and in '68 when Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy were killed, I was already a professional teacher. They were all older than I am, but Muhammad Ali is the face of my generation. Everything he lived, every historical thing he lived through, so did I. And I remember him being pretty and how wonderful and playful he was, and charming and sexy and deadly. He really was a warrior, but he was almost like a knight because he had courtesy. He was courteous. And he did the thing a good king does, is he treats everybody like an equal. They told a story about him today. One friend of his said that he was at the Olympics, I forget what year, and the American guy won. And everybody's cheering, and they bring the American guy over to talk to him. And Ali's talking to this guy, and they're saying 2 champs. And Ali looks at his friend and says, "I want to talk to the loser." And he says, "What?" He says, "I want to talk to the loser." So they go, there's nobody in the loser's locker room. And the guy is bleeding, and his face is down. And Ali says, "Let's throw a few punches." And they were sparring, and this guy came back to life, and Ali said, "Man, you did good. You're a champion. You got it in you." And he said, this loss of the Olympic gold medal, I know, it makes you cry. I mean, It's this, he says, "No, man." He also told a story, he and Billy Crystal told the story today that they were at Howard Cosell's funeral, sitting together, and Ali leaned over, he says, "Little brother," he always called Billy Crystal little brother. He says, "Little brother, do you think he has his earpiece on?" And Billy says, "I don't know." And Ali says, "Well, how will God recognize him?" And Crystal says, "The minute he opens his mouth." And they're laughing. They said they were just, it was like, that a little seltzer in your pants, that thing there on Mary Tyler Moore where they all start laughing at the funeral. Well, he and Ali are trying to contain themselves, and they can't. But that playfulness of him and Bill Clinton told a story when Bill Clinton was still up there talking when they were dedicating the Muhammad Ali Center for Parkinson's disease in Louisville. And President Clinton said, "I came down there and I was being, presidential." And Ali was standing behind me doing this with his fingers, not to be so serious. So the way he held it in balance, but if you look at, we look at the warrior archetype, and his stance against the Vietnam War was a warrior stance. It was the stance against an unjust war that gave so many people courage. they were, one of the guys is waiting for our draft numbers to come up, and he was the voice not just for African Americans, he was the voice for a whole generation, and that he was willing to stick to his principles even though it cost him 3 years and derision. It was finally overturned by the Supreme Court, but that he was steadfast during it. Bill Clinton just described him today. He said one thing that's wonderful for archetypes. He says, Muhammad Ali decided to tell his own story. He wrote his own story. Nobody wrote it for him. And I think that's one of the things that's how we grow, not letting our story be imposed on us.
Sure.
He described him as a truly free man of faith. And because he was a free man of faith, he understood always that he didn't have control over his life. And he managed with that Parkinson's disease he says, Clinton said this, Ali had Parkinson's disease for more years than Nelson Mandela was in prison.
Yeah.
And he bore it. I saw him in the theater. He couldn't speak. And he was majestic.
Yeah, we actually, when we spoke a few weeks ago and Ali came up, when we were talking about the king and in the absence of a king and who to return to and who the modern examples of it, Ali was definitely held the king energy. And it's, and a lot of the others as we're talking about, but not too many people really hold that benevolent kingly energy, and connected to everything. And you were saying how you had not met him, but you were in his presence. Tell us
I encountered him. It's one of the things all of the champions call him the champion. It's like they're all knights in Ali's court. Whether it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, there was I forget who all the different pallbearers were, but he was the round table. But my encounter with him was about, less than 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. I lose track of time. I was in New York, and I went to see a production of A Raisin in the Sun with Felicia Rashad. It was wonderful. And I always sit, when I go to the theater with my friend Ingrid, I always sit in the first two rows because she's barely 5 feet tall and she can't see. So we always sit way close. So I get to see all the spit and all the sweat. But it's wonderful. Well, at the intermission, I said, I'll be back in a few minutes. I need to go to the restroom. I stand up and turn toward the back of the theater. There's Muhammad Ali sitting on one seat off the aisle, 5 rows behind me. And I gasped, because he was it was as if he was encased in cement. Only his eyes moved. His mouth didn't even move that much. And I saw him, and he made eye contact with me. And I think I told you, I've been pretty close to the Dalai Lama. I had an audience with Pope John Paul. And these are known to be holy men. When he looked into my eyes, I thought, I'm in the presence of a truly holy man. And I started up the aisle to go to the bathroom. By the time I got to the back of the theater, I was weeping. I mean, just spontaneously, just the tears were just coming out of my eyes. And the usher said, "Sir, are you all right?" I said, "Yeah." He looked at me, but it was like a blessing. It was like darshan that the gurus gave. It was a transmission of something. It was holy. It was one of the 3 or 4 holiest moments in my life. And totally spontaneous, totally unexpected. I just felt blessed. It's, how the king gives a blessing?
Yeah.
It was like he put a sword on my shoulder and knighted me. That's what it felt like. I felt really seen by him.
Well, it's the acknowledgement, right? And the king the acknowledgement is in the domain of one of the domains of the king is acknowledgement. So being able to just look at someone and acknowledge them and have them feel that is a very kingly act. It's a way we could access that information.
I worked with celebrities for about 30 years of my adult life, including some big movie stars. Everybody sees them, but they don't see other people that much. But Ali saw me back.
Yeah.
Everybody looks at Ali. He's arguably one of the most, if not the most famous person in the world. He was for many years.
Yeah.
And he looked me right back. One on one. It wasn't, it was just this amazing thing. Yeah, I'm great. And the eulogies, it would be worth getting pieces of the eulogy of the funeral clips, because if you listen to the eulogy, they bring in the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover.
Yeah, he's definitely, you can definitely look at that encounter also and say, well, there was, a strong lover archetype, just making that connection in the place of the unspoken.
Mm-hmm.
It's where the lover kind of lives in an unspoken word.
They also said if Ali heard there was a village having a famine, he was on the plane with a check. If Ali heard that there was a school that needed help, he was at the school with his presence or a check. Billy Crystal said Ali, who's the most famous Muslim in the world, Billy Crystal was receiving an honor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and Ali went with him. He said, we raised a hell of a lot of money because Ali was there. And he knew I was there trying to create peace, and he went with me as a symbol, not of aggression or a symbol of opposition, but a symbol of how love transcends.
Yeah. And that's really, and we can pull all these others, but like, what better, the archetype that does all those things well is the king. It's said in some writings that, to really be the king, you have to be able to have the access to the mature lover, to the mature warrior, and also to the magician. Everybody works for the king. Right? Everybody works for the king, so you have access to him. And when you're in the light of the king, you can do that. And he did that so well, like you're saying, and go to at Howard Cosell's funeral and make a joke. That's having access to the magician and being able to offset the emotion and just shift the energy and play with the energy for the good. And
there was a thing on the news last night, because here's the thing, this wasn't about him. Not only do you have to have the king energy, you have to claim it and own it. Say, yes, I am this, which he did always. He said, yes, I am the greatest. He said, I ain't bragging because I am. He said, but last night, Rachel Maddow was interviewing Elizabeth Warren she had just endorsed Hillary Clinton. And everybody's speculating whether Elizabeth Warren will be a vice presidential running mate. It's all over the news. So Rachel Maddow says to her, former Governor Ed Rendell of Pennsylvania says, you're not equipped to be commander-in-chief. And then Rachel Maddow says, do you think if that responsibility fell on your shoulders, you could do it? And she paused a moment, and in the voice of the king, she said, yes, I can. And it was not bragging. It was so sober. It's like she reflected, and it's like, if the mantle is put on my shoulders, yes, I can. And it was gorgeous. It wasn't a queen. It was the king. It was the warrior and the king coming out right there.
Yeah. I mean, we'll kind of leave with this because I don't want this to be too long, but in what I've been listening to the last few days around people that knew Ali and talking about him and just other people's experiences with him. Yeah. It was really that ability to know who he was, know he was here for a larger purpose, and really be able to live into that and embrace that. And the part that always, and that's great, and the part that always gets me is when men like that do it in the face of the adversity, unpopularity. It's easy to kind of do that. It's easy to take a stand when other people are going to be behind you. Oh, that's great. I can stand for this. And people go, yes, I want to stand for that too. you know, it's easy, but when you're doing it and people are pointing guns at you and people are threatening you with jail, and in the case of Martin Luther King, another man that embodied this, you know, knew he was going to be taking a bullet and still did it.
One of the other speakers, and I know we're ending up, was this Baptist preacher from Louisville. And he said, Louisville's famous for two things, Muhammad Ali and the Kentucky Derby. And I'm inviting you all to come here and bet, but let me explain about the bet. You have, the winner is crowned with a garland of white roses. You don't get to bet on the horse when he's getting the crown of roses. You have to bet on him when he's in the mud, when he's galloping through the mud. And he said a lot of people bet on Ali. It's easy to bet on Ali now, but there are a lot of people here who bet on him when he was running in the mud. And that's exactly what you're saying. I don't think you can be a king if you haven't done, if you haven't, these are what we call, you know, we've talked about how wounds can either cripple us or initiate us. And he took every one and used them as an initiation and increased his power. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, we could go on. We could probably talk about this for 3 hours. It's such a great lesson. I'm sure Ali will come up in our future talks. But, you know, and I and John, Ali definitely worked in the kitchen.
Yes, he did.
He definitely worked in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So, Jim, thanks for getting on. I'm going to get this posted up on our YouTube channel and get it on the Facebook. And people, if you like this, kind of look out for what we've got coming up in the future. Subscribe and sign up for what we've got. We've got more great dialogue around what it means to be a man in this world. And thanks, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you, Frank. Have a good weekend.